Hi, welcome to the Marrying a Social Justice Collaborative video series on immigration. My name's Pam Orlowicz, and I'm a member of that immigration and refugee team. The history of America is the history of immigration from colonial times to the present. It is these immigrants and their descendants, along with the native peoples, who built this country and contributed to the history and accomplishments of this great land. Throughout our history, people have come here for many reasons, some seeking religious freedom or to seek an escape from tyranny and oppression, some because of famines or economic hardships, and some even came for opportunities for their children. Uh, some also came not of their own free will, but to be sold as slaves. They all make up the melting pot, which is America. These Their contributions to this land fill the history books with countless stories of everyday life, survival, bravery, hard work, and innovation. Immigration policy in the United States has vacillated greatly throughout history. Both sets of my grandparents came from Italy to the United States in the early 1900s, when America had a relatively open immigration policy. The majority of those immigrants came from Europe. I don't know what drove my grandparents to come here, but they settled here and made a life for themselves and their families. They sent their children to school, to work, and some to war. And these children produced the next generation of citizens of this great country, which includes me. I've continued the tradition with 4 children of my own who are currently contributing to the economy and the well-being of our country in various ways. It is important to note that between 30 and 40% of the current residents of the United States are descended from these immigrants who arrived here in the early 20th century. Our neighbors and our friends are all part of that group. My interest in the topic of immigration, however, doesn't have much to do with my family history or as a student of history. I had an experience about 12 years ago which focused my attention on the issue of immigrants. I heard about the conditions in an immigrant detention center located less than 30 minutes from my home. The detainees were housed in a windowless warehouse with very little access to the outside, no windows to let in some sunlight, inadequate food and medical care, with nothing to do, and really, they weren't allowed to go anywhere. I was horrified to learn of this facility. I was horrified that people who are seeking something more for themselves, just like my grandparents, were treated like this. Eventually, I trained to be a visitor, and I began visiting these detained immigrants. All I could do was listen to their stories and let them know that somebody cared. Why does this topic matter now? Well, a problem arises when talking about this issue because there are many different points of view. Some immigrants are viewed as people just like you and me, who are only seeking and searching for a place to have a chance to be safe from violence, to take care of their families, to be free, to make a better life. Other people view them as intruders or the other, who will somehow cause problems in our community and our country. According to a recent New York Times article, most people believe that immigrants strengthen the country, and many believe the U.S. should remain a haven for people fleeing repression, natural disasters, and unsafe living conditions. But other Americans think that the country's immigration laws should be tougher, and that citizens of other countries should not be able to enter this country simply because they want to. This attitude is often based on misinformation about immigrants or xenophobia or a nationalistic America first attitude. One of my pet peeves concerning the current discussions about immigrants is the misinformation, or what I call myths, about immigration currently circulating in the media. These myths come into our homes each day through TV news stations, Facebook, podcasts, tweets. As our previous videos have pointed out, the issue of immigration is complex. The system we have is very broken and does need fixing. I myself do not have the knowledge or the expertise to fix the system, but my focus in this session is to offer some clarification of some of the myths concerning immigrants. It's important that we know the facts. Our personal opinions and our decisions concerning which policies on immigration we would like to support need to be based on the truth as well as what the church teaches. Having a clearer understanding of immigration issues we are currently dealing with in the United States, especially during this election season, is essential if we are to decide which policies we will support as Christian Catholics and Marianists. The first myth I'd like to talk about is that myth that we are facing a border crisis. The current reality of undocumented immigration. Because current U.S. immigration laws provide few opportunities for most prospective immigrants to enter the country, many people do make unauthorized border crossings. But the preliminary source of the newly undocumented immigrants is visa overstays, not people entering through the southern border. These people come into the country on a visa and just don't leave. The number of visa overstays each year is estimated between 6,500,000 or 850,000. 90% of the overstays come from countries outside of Mexico and Central America. For every one border arrest, there are 30 overstays. But we never hear about this. In spite of this information, public attention and funding is largely focused on controlling the southern border. The U.S. government has invested almost $20 billion on border security and enforcement in recent decades, and only $7 billion on processing legal entries and refugees and overstays. According to what I've read, the only thing increasing border security measures have created is a rise in cartel-controlled human smuggling and a tragically high number of migrant deaths at the U.S.-Mexico border. This is the sad reality at our southern border. Demonizing people who do come through the southern border accomplishes nothing positive. The lopsided funding is one example of a very broken system. This information points out clearly, however, that a wall along the border with Mexico would not stop undocumented immigrants from coming to the United States. So no, calling what's happening at the border a crisis is misleading. We have a broken system. Myth. The U.S. has an open border policy for immigrants. According to immigration historian David Reimers, it is true that for about the first 100 years in the history of our country, the United States did have an open immigration system that allowed any able-bodied immigrant who was healthy and not a criminal to come here. Today, however, legally coming to the United States is a rigorous, complicated, and backlogged process. There are few ways to enter the U.S. legally, and each pathway is highly constricted, both because of numerous rules as well as because inadequate funding is allocated to staff the processing of applications. There are 4 categories to gain lawful permanent residence. Family-based. Here's where American citizens and green card holders can sponsor a family member. This migration is limited to less than 500,000 per year. But this pathway is extremely slow, sometimes people waiting decades to sponsor one relative. Employment-based. An American firm can sponsor a skilled worker if they can demonstrate that no one already in this country can do the job. This pathway is limited to about 140,000 per year. Lottery-based. This program started in 1980 and allows 50,000 lottery applicants per year to secure lawful permanent residence once vetted. In 2017, there were 23 million applicants for 50,000 slots. Humanitarian relief is the last category. In 2024, nearly 300 million people worldwide will be forcibly displaced and in need of humanitarian assistance and protection due to conflicts, climate emergencies, and some other drivers. Humanitarian protections such as asylum, temporary protected status, and other programs which may permit someone to reside in the United States legally do not have numerical caps, but they do have other restrictions. It should be noted that the U.S. takes in sufficiently fewer immigrants per capita than most other countries which are considered to have modern economies. And it also should be noted that rule changes in response to current events and politics make the process of coming to the U.S. even more complicated. Many of our immigration ancestors who arrived between 1790 and 1924 would not have been allowed to enter this country under the current immigration policies. So no, the United States does not have an open border immigration system. In fact, we take in fewer immigrants per capita than other modern economy nations. Myth: immigrants increase the crime rate. Immigrants coming to this country come for a few primary reasons: to work, to be reunited with family members, or to escape a dangerous situation or a natural disaster. Most are couples or families with children. Some are workers, I might add, and they are integral to the United States economy. Statistics show that immigrants are less likely to commit serious crimes or be behind bars than native-born people are, and high rates of immigration are associated with lower rates of violent crime and property crime. There are some studies that find no connection between the concentration of immigrants in an area and crime rates, but others find that as this concentration of immigrants rises, the area tends to be safer for everyone. All told, the growth of the foreign-born population in recent decades likely contributed to the significant reduction in violent and property crime seen in the United States between the early 1990s and the start of the pandemic. Additionally, it should be noted that right now, violent crime numbers are decreasing each year since the pandemic. So no, crime does not increase due to undocumented people living in the United States. Myth: undocumented immigrants smuggle thousands of pounds of fentanyl into the United States. Thousands of pounds of fentanyl are smuggled into the United States every month. It's very important to note that according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection reports, Americans accounted for nearly 90% of convicted fentanyl drug traffickers, and 96% of fentanyl seizures occurred at official ports of entry, not along migration routes between the checkpoints. For the cartels, the ideal candidate to smuggle fentanyl into the U.S. is someone who is authorized to cross the border and goes back and forth often because they won't attract attention from the customs officers at the checkpoints. So no, according to my research, large numbers of undocumented immigrants are not bringing fentanyl across the southern border. Here's a myth: immigrants drain public resources while not paying taxes. Immigrants do not burden public resources. Studies consistently indicate that immigrants, including those without proper documentation, contribute positively to public resources because they pay income taxes, property taxes, and sales taxes just like everybody else. Unauthorized workers who wish to file their taxes and to potentially get future credit for filing taxes in order to possibly qualify for legal status use the Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, or ITIN, which allows undocumented to the immigrants without Social Security numbers to legally file tax returns and claim the income reported on their W-2s to the IRS. It's very important to note that undocumented immigrants are generally ineligible for federal public benefit programs. So even after obtaining lawful permanent resident status, immigrants are typically subject to a 5-year bar before becoming eligible for federal means-tested public benefits. So no, immigrants are not draining public resources. Just to end this discussion, the current wave of immigrants come here for the same reasons my grandparents did, and countless others came with them. What they seek here is what we all seek: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are the things that our Declaration of Independence states, quote, have been given to all humans by their Creator, and which governments are created to protect. The system needs fixing, but whatever fixes might be needed, breaking up families and putting children in cages is not the answer. Fear-mongering rhetoric, which spreads lies that dehumanizes immigrants and stokes unwarranted fears, is not the answer. If we can get a man on the moon, we should be able to come up with a system for immigration to this country which takes into account the humanity of all peoples, no matter the color of their skin, the language they speak, or the God they worship. Thanks for listening. I hope that these videos have offered you some things to think about. If you would like to get more information about the Marianist Social Justice Collaborative, check out our website at MarianistJC.net, or just Google the Marianist Social Justice Collaborative. I'd like to end this video with a quote from the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. He said, quote, "We the people of this continent are not afraid of foreigners because many of us were once foreigners. Every aspect of the American economy has profited from the contribution of immigrants. A child on the other side of the border is no less worthy of love and compassion than our old child." Thank you for listening, and I hope that you take all that I said into consideration when you decide what policies you'd like to support